I call the Honourable Tim Macindoe.
Thank you, Mr Chair. And listening to the Minister, actually I have to say I am deeply indebted to you, Mr Chair, because I was in here for 4 hours before lunch. I sought the call more than 25 times and I didn't get it once, so I am indebted. But let me take advantage of the opportunity I've got now. And I've just been listening to the Minister, frankly, tying himself up in knots. On this particular clause, and you were quite right, Mr Chair, we are looking at an amendment to Section 55 of the Principal Act. And the reasons why a Member of Parliament at the moment might leave this place are pretty significant. One would very sadly be the death of the member. Another would be the member voluntarily making a choice to resign, and we see that quite often for very good reasons that we understand. We've been to many valedictories over the years for that sort of purpose. Obviously, chronic ill health might force somebody to have to resign. But there can also be some pretty serious things, such as the member being convicted of a corrupt practice. Now, sir, I mentioned those provisions of the Principal Act because here we are being asked to consider an amendment which is essentially a member may also be dismissed because he or she fell out with the leader. Now, sir, I think that is outrageous to put that on the same level as the other very sound reasons that are in the Principal Act. And I see the Minister in the chair shaking his head, as he has done frequently, and yet I make the point that the Honourable Dr Nick Smith made before. The Minister sits there and continues to say that he is right and every other commentator on this bill is wrong. And he's nodding, he's acknowledging. He is apparently the only one who is right. All of these highly respected academic experts, some of the great commentators who have looked in detail at this bill and who are very well placed to advise this committee, are all saying the Minister is wrong, and yet he continues to sit there and argue, no, I'm the only one who's right. And I have to say that I think it was Dr Smith who said earlier, maybe in another speaker, that he had a degree of sympathy for Mr Little because Mr Little is actually having to push this bill through. He probably doesn't firmly believe in it. In fact, it would be interesting to ask the Minister now, does the Minister genuinely believe in this bill?
He's laughing.
He's laughing now. Does the Minister genuinely believe that amending Section 55 of the Principal Act with Clause 4 is the right, principled thing to do? I add my sympathy to the previous speaker who felt very sorry. I wonder if I could ask the Minister the next time he takes a call, does he agree, or the late Jim Anderton now, did he agree with the late Jim Anderton when he claimed I didn't leave the Labor Party left me? Because that relates directly to the clause we're being asked to consider here. If a Member of Parliament says, I'm sticking to the principles that I was elected upon, I'm sticking to the principles that the party I'm a member of took to the last election, and in the case of the Labor Party it held for about 80 years before that, when Jim Anderton was resigning, if the member is genuinely of the belief that he or she is sticking to the principles of the party, but the party is the one that has moved well away, how on earth could we expect Clause 4 to be allowed? What a travesty it would be to allow Clause 4 to apply to that person. Now, in the last Parliament, the member Richard Prosser was becoming increasingly disillusioned as a member of New Zealand First, and he, of course, paid a price in that he was bumped down the list. Now, whatever you might think of that, at least that was a list that was taken to an election. But if Richard Prosser, because he was speaking out against New Zealand First on a number of occasions, and he certainly is speaking out about them regularly now, had been in a position where he was told, right, you have to go, surely he would have been entitled to say, but I worked incredibly hard. I believed in what New Zealand First took to the electorate. I and the activists who worked, I think he was based down in Christchurch, who worked with me to get me elected in Christchurch as a list member, were doing our level best to comply with the and to abide by the principles of our party. And here we are in a position where the party has moved away, and now I'm being told, you are inconvenient, we don't like what you're saying, you will have to go. So I think it is outrageous that Section 55 of the Act should be amended in that way, and I really ask all members opposite to explain how they think they could justify it.
I call the Honourable Ron Marsh.
Good Chair. I've decided that listening to some of the commentary and listening to the Honourable